I'll go on mute.
Darren, you may want to mute too real quick.
Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a minute. I see people are joining rapidly, so we're just going to give everybody a couple minutes to log on to our webinar, and we'll get started here in just 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, we got a very punctual crowd here. This is great. Okay, well, we are punctual too here at the KC Tech Council. I'm just going to give everybody about 1 more minute here. I'm going to kick it off. Let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Weber. I'm President and CEO of the KC Tech Council. We have an exciting program for you, all virtual, all online, which is all of our lives now pretty much. And it's a timely conversation. We at the KC Tech Council do a lot to provide real-time data in regards to workforce trends, not only so that we're more educated about the workforce needs of our member companies, but also the real goal here is that you become more educated in real time about the data, the trends, the companies that are hiring. And we put together this monthly report called Tech Checkpoint. And there's no way we could do this without the great content and insight from our partners at ECCO Select. You're gonna get a chance to hear from Darren Pringer here in just a couple of minutes. And we're gonna go through this live. Folks, you're getting more emails than probably ever before. Probably getting more emails from us than ever before. So we wanted to take a chance to take some of these emails, these reports, get a chance to do these live and analyze the data in a unique way, get some engagement from each of you using this wonderful tool here with Zoom, a Kansas City company, folks. They've got a couple hundred people in Overland Park. And if you've called customer support to Zoom, you've called their offices in Overland Park, Kansas. So even though they started out of Silicon Valley, they've got a large operation here in Kansas and a heck of a product and tool that allows us to deliver these services to you. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Darren Pringer, Chief Operating Officer of ECCO Select. You're also going to hear from Kara Lowe, the KC Tech Council's Chief Operating Officer. And guys, I just realized we got 2 Chief Operating Officers on the same call. This is great. You know, I've talked about a lot of operations here. What I'm going to do first, though, is walk you through the report, the data, going to give you some analysis of that. But then we've got this expert panel here at the end of this call so that you can hear what's going on the front lines in the workforce conversation here, not only in Kansas City, but maybe even nationally too. And folks, listen, you know this. There's been a lot of changes to our lives over the last month, and a lot of changes to workforce over the last month. We don't know what the next several months are going to hold, but what we do know is that data is a bigger part of our decision-making process than ever before. So again, we put these reports together to help make our knowledge about workforce trends higher, but the goal is that you become an expert as well. So if you guys don't mind, we're gonna go ahead and dive right in. And again, with this functionality, we've got a Q&A section down here at the bottom or wherever it is on your screen. If you've got a question throughout this presentation, please go ahead and type that into the Q&A section. I'm gonna be monitoring that. And I'll make sure at the end of this call, we get a chance to make sure that all of your questions are answered in a timely way. And if we don't know the answers, we'll go find them and get them to you. So let's get started. With any data set, it's important to know where it's coming from. And because of the support of ECCO Select and our member companies, we are able to leverage an important database that Gartner puts together. It's called Talent Neuron. This is as close as we've been able to get to real-time workforce data in a granular way. We're able to really start to segment not only geographically, but industry, company. And as you can see at the top, there's all these different reports here that we can see for candidates, labor markets, employers, jobs, trends, you name it. It's the best product we've been able to find. There's a lot of them out there. This is the one we use from the trusted source at Gartner. It's also, again, the most real-time tool that we have been able to find. And I say that because what we have found is that a lot of workforce reports that you'll be analyzing are leveraging public sources. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to make a real-time decision, those public sources of data are not necessarily produced in real time. And for some industries, it's not that critical. For the tech industry, it changes faster than others. And that's why we've invested in this product and this tool to make certain that we're producing the most real-time report that we can. So when we produce the tech checkpoint for the month of April, you're getting the last month's data. And that is as close as we can get to that real time. We also, if you're not getting our emails or if it's not getting directly to your inbox, don't worry. You can go to the KC Tech Council website and we make sure that we produce and publish all of these reports so the entire community can access this. Now, obviously, we want you to be a paying member of the KC Tech Council. We are solely funded by the industry. We need that support now more than ever before. So if you're at all interested in membership, we'll have that conversation offline. But for these reports, we felt it was important to make sure the entire public had access to this data rather than restricting that only for our member companies. But again, you can just go to kctechcouncil.com. We've got an entire data section there of not only this report, but our annual report that gives you much more detailed information about Kansas City's tech industry and where we rank across the country. Again, this is what the page looks like. You'll see not only April's report, but you'll be able to go back historically and see more information that includes that data, as well as the analysis that ECCO Select provides us. And Darren, thanks again to your team for doing this on a monthly basis. They've done a great job of giving their own expertise and lending that to this report. And I think it helps a lot, honestly. If it was just a rundown of data and information, it can kind of be overwhelming, as you guys will see, and I'll walk through all this report. But getting that insight has really been helpful, even us as we're producing these every month. Seeing those different analysis from your team has been very helpful, since they're on the front line seeing this every day and how this data is really being applied and producing these reports. Now, this is a full version of the report. I'm going to go into these kind of sections by sections. Now, not a big shock, everybody. Job postings were down last month. And most of that is we believe, obviously, a sign of time, considering there's a lot of uncertainty right now in our economy and our future workforce needs. Postings were down, but they weren't down. I'm sorry, the tech industry, though, is not down as much as other industries. And if I was to make a bold prediction about the future, not only is technology really keeping our economy going, like we're using this great tool right now, but I do believe tech companies will come back first. They'll be the first to post jobs. These will be the most in-demand jobs. These will be amongst some of the highest paying jobs in Kansas City. So not only are we leveraging technology to help our businesses continue to operate right now, but I think the tech industry, and again, I'm biased, has never been more important to Kansas City's economy and our ability to rebound from what's been going on over the last month and then what's to come over the next several months. So let's dive into this real quick. We analyze occupations because I think it's important that everyone knows what these jobs are called. Now, in the tech industry, we're guilty of getting pretty creative with what we call different positions. And for those of you out there that's got a chief whatever officer or director of fun or whatever you want to name it, as creative as that is, makes analyzing your workforce needs pretty tough. Even though I don't want you to force you into a boring standardization of occupations and job titles, actually is pretty important. And we'll make sure that your information is counted in reports like this. Something that hasn't changed a whole lot over the past couple of years of analyzing this data, the top two positions of software engineer, project manager, they kind of flip back and forth from month to month. That really shouldn't surprise most people in the industry, except for I do want to highlight project manager. It is not necessarily a highly technical role in our industry, but it still is very important you understand how the technology works. Whether or not you can code the software or build the databases that are being used to run that business, understanding how that's done is incredibly important because you will work directly with those software engineers, senior software engineers, network engineers, and on down the list. Even though we did see a decrease in those postings last month, look at how many positions are available today for all these various occupations. Folks, there's still a lot of open jobs in our tech industry, and they pay exceptionally well. And our workforce report from our KC Tech Specs annual report showed that the median wage for a tech occupation in Kansas City was 82% higher than other occupations. Software engineers in Kansas City do quite well. And again, these are skills that need to be learned and honed over time, but they're extremely in demand. There's almost 900 of those positions open in Kansas City today. So even though there was a decrease, shouldn't surprise you. What should surprise you is that there's still almost 900 of those specific jobs with software engineers specifically that are available right now. So there still is demand, there's still hiring, and I think that's a very important thing that I would like to point out to you today. This is not a negative conversation about the industry, even though we're seeing a slight decrease of postings, there's still open jobs. Now, some of these occupations do require you to have certifications, but I don't want that to make anyone listening to this that may be new to this conversation believe that you have to have a certification. More and more, we're seeing that that's not necessarily required, but I'll let Darren and Kara talk more about that. We do have a lot of government work in Kansas City, probably more than what we're ever going to be allowed to know. And security clearances are still highly in demand for a tech industry job, as well as cybersecurity, project management, and other certifications that are being posted in the job. So we're getting this data because they were included in a job posting. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're required to have that occupation. But again, here's a rundown of all of the entire top certifications that were in demand last month. Now, they also include in a lot of job postings the skills that are required for these jobs. And what we're seeing here is that there's some new skills here that are being included in job postings, and something that we've seen a trend over the last month here. Some of the words that companies are using to describe these skills are starting to change as well. But some of these probably wouldn't be a huge surprise for a tech job, but we do make sure to include these as top skills that are in demand. And this is just Kansas City, folks. We're not analyzing the entire country. We're analyzing the metro area here for Kansas City. So these are from these postings in the area, and that's just what we're analyzing. So not macro scale necessarily, just the micro scale here in Kansas City. I do want to point out here, if you're at all interested in a cybersecurity career, or if you're currently in that career, you made some pretty wise choices. Those are highly demanded skills. Data is such an important part of every business, and securing that data and securing infrastructure and systems never been more important. And we've seen such an increase of scams and really just trying to leverage the fact that most workers are working from home. And if companies didn't have good practices for managing that risk, they're seeing that they were quite vulnerable right now. That's not going to go away. Cybersecurity positions, cybersecurity skills are some of the most highly demanded, but also very few in the labor pool who have those skills. So if you know anything about economics, supply and demand, low supply, high demand in regards to employment, it's going to be job security. It's also going to mean higher wages. Now, on this slide, there's a couple things I really want to point out here. When we analyze this, people are often surprised, say, well, Oracle doesn't have an office in Kansas City. How could they possibly be posting that many jobs? Oracle doesn't care where you live and work. Kind of like most companies don't care where you live and work. But if you've got a takeaway from this, it should be that your competition for job postings and for attracting talent, it's not local, it's global. The largest employer in Kansas City is fifth on this list. That should be the one indicator there that they are also in that same position of recruiting in a much different way. Now, we've got a job board on the KC Tech Council site, and we've opened this up to be completely free for everyone in the community. As long as you're posting a tech job of some nature, it doesn't have to be specifically computer engineering. It can also be in the tech industry in any way. We do kind of monitor that, make sure it's on brand, but be creative about where and how you're posting these jobs, because you're not just competing with local companies, you're competing globally. And that's a big part of what we want you to take away from this, and that so many of these coastal firms are the ones that are posting the largest number of jobs in our area. And now I will take a second, see if there's any questions that came through the Q&A for this specific portion. Looks like that got answered already, so thank you, Kara. At this point in time, I'm going to introduce Kara Lowe, our Chief Operating Officer at the KC Tech Council, to take it away, introduce our featured speaker and the rest of our session today. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to go through that report. I also want to give a big thank you to our team that produces this report. Haley Regan and Alexa, our intern, who do a great job of putting this information together quickly, monthly, and then also the analysis from ECCO Select and their support producing that report. So on that, turn it over to Kara to take for the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in, whether you're watching us over on Facebook Live or here on the webinar. We really appreciate your attention and interest in this topic. We think this is now more than ever a really critical conversation to be having around tech talent. And I'm really excited to bring on one of the experts in tech talent from a company who handles a ton of that work in our region and on behalf of companies across the country. Darren is the Chief Operating Officer at ECCO Select. They are great KC Tech Council partners. Darren has been highly involved with a lot of our initiatives. And Jeanette Pringer, the CEO of ECCO Select, sits on the KC Tech Council Board of Directors. So we have a lot of great engagement with this terrific organization. We've learned a lot from them. So without any further ado, I'm gonna let Darren tell you a little bit more about who he is and what he does for ECCO Select. Darren.
Thanks, Kara, and good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see so much participation. I'll try to be interesting. I can't promise that I will be, but hopefully you get some insights and some meaning from the conversation Kara and I have. Quick background about myself. I am the Chief Operating Officer at ECCO Select. I have been in the IT industry, both on the corporate side and in the consulting staffing industry for about 17 years now, all in Kansas City. So I like to think that I've got a good background with regards to this particular marketplace and how, obviously technology has evolved over that time and where we stand today. So I'm really excited about the conversation. ECCO Select is headquartered here in Kansas City, and we've been in business since 1995, and we really straddle the line between both IT consulting and IT staffing, serving both the private and the public sectors with an kind of an equal revenue distribution across both of those markets. So again, really excited to be here today. Thank you to the KC Tech Council for inviting me, and hope you guys get something out of the discussion.
Well, I know we will. And I will mention to those listening, there is the chat function on your control panel on Zoom. I don't know, some people, it's on the top of the screen. Please do utilize that. We will be taking questions. I've got a few that I've prepared for Darren, but I know that there's probably a lot that is on your mind as well. Please drop those questions into the chat function, and we will monitor that through our conversation and make sure we get to as many of those as we can. And if we don't get to your question in the time frame of the webinar, we will make sure to circle back and get that information to you, because I know this is something that's pretty top of mind for a lot of us. So I'm going to open it up kind of playing off of the information that Ryan just presented with the insight from this month's Tech Checkpoint. And I think tech is certainly not immune to some of the furlough and layoff activity that we've seen, across all sectors. I think locally, we've all been aware of some of the stories of a lot of, technology workers being part of a larger furlough or layoff. But, I think what else we've determined is that there are a ton of open tech jobs, and tech remains a really thin talent market. So with some of these maybe new talent coming on the job market that maybe were not there before, what can companies be doing now to maybe get access to some of these candidates that they would not have otherwise seen?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I appreciate you teeing up a softball for me to start. I mean, I'd say if you're looking for access, just call ECCO, right? Yeah, you teed me up there, so I had to take the opportunity. No, but in all seriousness, I would say that, you know, companies in the area and really across the country, I mean, Kansas City is a great hotbed for tech talent. There's two perspectives that I would encourage them to really look at for different reasons. The first is, you know, this is a great opportunity right now to leverage contract labor. We can all agree high unemployment is not a good thing. However, for businesses who are looking to hire, it's a candidate-rich market right now. And given the economic and general market uncertainty, hiring contract labor really gives you the benefit of moving forward initiatives and subsequent projects to advance your business operation, while still giving you some of the flexibility to pivot and reduce expenses if you know, things turn for the worse, and then, you know, you take the next appropriate action. I'll follow that up by saying, you know, that's not an ideal position from a candidate perspective, but it does give them the opportunity to gain valuable experience and keep their skills sharp if, you know, the worst case scenario does play out. And if you tie on to a solid firm with a strong customer portfolio, there's a good chance you can move on to a different client if your engagement unexpectedly ends. So I think that that's, you know, a perspective to keep in mind. But I also think, you know, companies, they need to be looking at the current environment with a long-term and strategic view as well. I mean, a lot of companies are still in a very strong financial position based on the previous 12 to 24 months that they experienced prior to this outbreak. So I would just say, and some of them are even strengthened with the financial stimulus that's taken place. So I think every organization just needs to balance their unique financial position with their key organizational initiatives for the next 12 to 24 months, and then invest based on those conditions. I mean, Ryan talked about it with the checkpoint report, but there's a lot of needs out there right now that really are a direct response to this pandemic and the way it's affect our livelihoods. So when you talk about streaming technology, network infrastructure, security, and then you also think about consumer behavior, how everything's going to online, and it has been for a long time, but it's even more reinforced now. So you're talking about skill sets that are really prevalent in the tech space, and I think companies would be prudent to continue to respond to the changing consumer environment and strategically hire for those talents.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to kind of flip it onto the candidate side for you. And I think you identified a couple of these opportunities kind of writ large. It's a good time to pick up skills and make sure you're pursuing, you know, things. I know all of our lives are our day-by-day activities look completely different in some ways. I know a lot of us are also now homeschool educators and handling a host of responsibilities throughout the day. But I know there are many of us who are utilizing at least sections of this time to kind of sharpen the saw and pick up, you know, brush up existing technical skills or programming languages they may have kind of picked up and put aside. If from a candidate perspective, what you're hearing from your partners in the market, what are some of those skills, some of those, you know, programming languages, other in-demand, maybe certifications? If you were giving advice to a candidate, what are some of the areas you would point them, you know, to in terms of skills?
Yeah, and I would obviously welcome input from the audience on this, you know, after we get done. But I mean, you know, obviously from ECCO's perspective, a lot of the things that you're seeing in demand are things that have been in demand for quite some time now. And I think, again, it just reinforces the need for these technologies and these solutions because, you know, our lives have been disrupted pretty significantly. But, you know, anything that's relevant to big data, cloud, analysis, web development, web design, user experience, all of those supporting technologies are going to be really important moving forward. And if you're in a domain that is either, you know, equivalent to that or maybe even is a complement to that, I would say, you know, scripting languages like PowerShell and Python, SQL and NoSQL database experience, Hadoop, Jenkins, Docker. I mean, for the technology people on the call, you'll know what we're talking about here. And then, you know, we talked about web design, web development, Angular, PHP, JavaScript. These are all, you know, very high in demand skill sets. And I think will certainly continue to be high in demand for quite a while. And then from a certification perspective, again, anything that's cloud related. And then Ryan already talked about, I mean, security is huge right now. Security has been an amplified topic for quite some time. And now you've got people who aren't protected under corporate firewalls anymore. It's going to be that much more important, you know, with all the remote work that's happening.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think a lot of companies are finding just how prepared they were from a security perspective, maybe on the fly and in a not so easy way.
Right.
You know, kind of going back to some of the skills and how to pick that up, I think something we've seen, and I want to make a quick plug of our own, we have on our KC Tech Council website an education and workforce resource page for candidates. So if you do find yourself looking for resources to sharpen the saw, to pick up some of these skills that maybe you want to hone further or learn for the first time, you're welcome to visit our website. We have a lot of partners. I think our friends at KU Edwards campus and some of our other training program partners are on this call as well. I know they would all be happy to talk to you and to help you find your way to those skills. Are there any good resources that you've pointed people toward, Darren, from a candidate perspective online? I know Park University has a lot of great resources.
Yeah, I mean, you know, pretty much every university and college in town has good resources. We use Centric for a lot of the training that we do, especially with some of our government contracts where we're either required to certify in certain domain areas or we're developing associates for, you know, a next role or what have you. So that's
Right.
That's one as well.
Yeah, no, they're great partners of ours too. You know, I think in Kansas City across the board, we are really fortunate to have a lot of different pathways for those skills acquisition, and you know, now more than ever, I think those are resources we should be aware of and leaning on. So our website's a good place for it, and I know ECCO Select can point you in a lot of good directions as well.
Hey Kara,
So
I just wanted to
yeah.
comment. I saw a comment come in on the chat board, but I do want to say that, you know, a lot of the roles that we are trying to place and recruit talent for, they don't necessarily require certifications on
Right.
a lot of those positions. I mean, a lot of times experience, and I will tell you just my personal experience has been a lot of times really your approach to problem solving is a lot more important to them than what, you know, how many years of experience you have with a particular technology. Of course, there's a foundational technology background you have to have in some of those positions, but your ability to critically think, problem solve, and fit into their culture, you know, those things are equally, if not more important.
Right. I mean, I think we showed how in demand the position of product manager and project manager are in Kansas City. And those are exactly those types of skill sets. It's problem solving, it's communication, it's the ability to live at the intersection of user and technologist, and truly, you know, not everybody is able to do that. And it really does take a set of core skills that aren't necessarily technical. So I would encourage folks to, you know, dig a little bit deeper than just those developer jobs, which are also very much in demand. But there are a host of other roles in not just the software development lifecycle alone that are very available. So I want to go back to the company side, and we kind of touched on this, that companies are learning on the fly a little bit whether and how well they were prepared to support remote work. And they may realize then that their IT bench maybe needs to be a little bit deeper than they had initially planned for. I'm wondering, and this is, you know, kind of a selfish question from the Tech Council, I'd love to see kind of what you're seeing in terms of what industries, from a larger perspective, are you seeing kind of looking back at that IT bench that they built and thought we need to reinvest in our tech talent workforce, and what plans are you seeing those industries make right now?
That's a good question. I would say there's definitely a need. I would also kind of caveat that with ECCO's perspective may not be the best, and I say that because our customer base is primarily made up of fairly large enterprises, and of course, you know, federal agencies that have, you know, they've got significant sized corporate IT support departments and whatnot. And so, you know, having to mobilize their workforce virtually in a fairly quick and secure manner isn't necessarily they're completely unprepared for. Of course, there's, you know, tweaks and whatnot they go through, but they, you know, they're pretty well set up to be able to handle that type of transition. I will say the small to middle market, I think there's a huge opportunity, particularly for companies who are in the managed services space. Because a lot of those companies are you know, they weren't prepared for this, and they're very traditional in nature in terms of how they go to work. Brick and mortar offices, desktop based workstation, hardwired telephones. And surprisingly and unfortunately, I think one of the industries that was not prepared for this is the healthcare industry. And I'm not talking about hospitals and large clinical offices. I'm talking about specialty practices where, you know, if they're not physically seeing patients, they're not necessarily doing business. However, their administrative functions aren't set up either for, you know, bills to get paid and invoices to be sent and those types of things. And so I do think that there's an opportunity in that industry to service a need, but I would say it's probably pretty agnostic when you think about that company demographic size.
Yeah, no, that's a good perspective. And we actually had a question come in that I think kind of tags on this. In your opinion, Darren, once the full lockdown is lifted and really the economy starts picking back up, this is maybe not what is happening right now, but what you maybe foresee happening. Where do you see a big increase of IT demand coming from a talent perspective? What industries and sectors should we keep our eye on maybe 6 months from now, year from now?
Absolutely. Well, I think healthcare is a no-brainer, right? I mean, they're still going to be responding to this particular pandemic, as well as now that we're experiencing it, now everyone's going to be like, okay, we got to make sure that if this happens again in the future, we don't have to be stuck at home for 2 months or what have you. So I would say healthcare is an obvious one. And I would say that, you know, that's probably across the board for all the industries that are being stressed right now, not financially, but from a fulfillment perspective. So you're talking about transportation, you're talking about supply chain organizations. So I think that those are definitely industries that we can see an uptick. And then again, I go back to the original question, which is you also need to pay attention to those companies who were doing really well before this and were positioned to, you know, kind of take a little bit of the blow, because they're going to be sitting on cash for the next couple of months. And then when it's time to rebuild, they're going to be positioned to do so because they've been very disciplined and, organized with how they're managing their businesses.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not a one solution fit. I think it will be pretty dynamic. So I know you guys do a lot of work with the federal government and supporting their IT initiatives. I read a story on, I saw it online yesterday, that there is now a sudden uptick in need for COBOL for programmers, because so many of the blasts from the past, so many of those kind of legacy websites, a lot of the employment websites I think were in particular called out as being built on COBOL. And this is not necessarily a top 5 programming language that's being used daily by most large scale IT enterprises. However, there still is that existing need. So not maybe necessarily just for COBOL, but are you predicting a spike in demand and maybe a change in how the civic and government sector are going to approach their IT strategy as a result of the pandemic?
So let me make sure I understand the question. So what you're asking is are you asking if they're going to be looking to modernize, or I want to make sure?
Yeah, I mean, sort of if the story that's coming out of this is that there is this kind of legacy program that's being relied upon with a very niche programming language that used to be ubiquitous, and in a lot, I mean, the banking industry still uses it heavily. Are you seeing this as a moment of change for digital transformation efforts for the federal government, for state governments, and even down to the kind of local civic sector?
Yeah, and I would say that that they have known for a long time that that's where they needed to go. But when you're talking about multiple layers of government, none of them really move fast, for one, and obviously it has to kind of work its way down. And just like most major initiatives, you kind of have to have something happen to create urgency around it, especially if, it's big and hairy. Yeah. And so, unfortunately, this is one of those situations where it's not going to be a luxury anymore to have to go spend millions of dollars to modernize their systems. It's going to be a necessity. Otherwise, they're not going to be set up to operate effectively to meet the needs of, the country if they're not set up. I mean, you're hearing stories about Medicare, Medicaid right now that they can't sufficiently service their customer base because their technology systems are too old and archaic. I will say this, If they're looking for COBOL programmers, Jeanette can still do some COBOL programming.
I love it.
The talent is not completely dormant in the area.
Well, it was a group out of Austin was highlighted in this story, and the group called themselves the COBOL Cowboys, which was cute. But I thought there's some COBOL cowgirls out there too. And I'm glad to know we've got one in our ranks. That's good to hear.
In all seriousness, no, I mean, there's definitely going to be an urgency to modernize. And again, that goes back to the original answer, which is all those skill sets we talked about from the beginning, they're going to be in high demand, both from an agency modernization perspective, but also, again, in direct response to the pandemic.
Right. You know, and I'm curious kind of more from a ECCO Select perspective, and you as on the leadership team running this really important business to an industry that has a big old spotlight on it right now. How are you guys preparing, for the end to a stay-at-home order, when you get back into an office space? What do you see changing once your team is able to return to the office?
Yeah, as far as preparations and stuff, I mean, we aren't really doing a whole lot differently, and this is where I have to, I have to really tip my cap to our team at ECCO, and of course I'm biased, but they've done such a phenomenal job of just focusing in on the task at hand since we've had to kind of change the way we work and live every day, and our business is still going on just like everyone else's, and so we have to figure out how to make it work. So in terms of, what we're doing to prepare, I mean, obviously we're ensuring our headquarters is operating normally so that when we do come back, we're hitting the ground running. We definitely are communicating differently. We're doing daily stand-ups and weekly team meetings to ensure that we're communicating transparently about, the health of the business, as well as timelines around when we expect things to start to come back to normal and those types of things. But, those have all become just routine activities for us as part of our new normal. I will say this, I mean, as far as what I see changing when we return, I think work from home is here to stay. I think it's going to become more the norm and less the exception. Yeah. We had a very large client this last week quote that since they were forced to work from home, which before was something you had to get, pretty significant approval for, that their team has been 30% more productive. Now, I don't know how they're managing that, but the fact that he just kind of, spouted that out without any kind of, I mean, we didn't even ask. It obviously is an indicator that this is a way that can really be used to your advantage if you do it the right way. And I think a lot of managers and leaders get scared about that because they sit there and wonder, okay, well, how can I maintain accountability? But, if you've got the right team, you've got the right culture, and then you've got the right control measures in place to ensure that accountability can be maintained without it. You don't have to be babysitting, right? Then I really do think that this is an opportunity to become more efficient, and also, I think give back some quality of life to some people. I mean, I think that a lot of people thrive in this environment, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, and the interesting thing is this is not an ordinary type of work from home arrangement for many of us. We have small children, school-age children, college kids back at home who don't want to be there, maybe. A lot of, I know a lot of folks on the teams that we talk to have older parents that they care for who live with them as well. So, I mean, this is certainly a departure from what an ordinary work from home day might look like in the future. And the fact that we're still across the board seeing a lot of uptick, is we've heard that from some other companies as well, that productivity has not suffered as a result of this very unique and sudden arrangement. I think there are some learnings to take away. I think one of the things Ryan kind of touched on, I'm curious just your perspective on this. As we see more of a remote ready workforce and we have maybe more trust placed into that kind of configuration and more companies adopt it, the talent pool kind of becomes pretty flat across the country. If you can connect with candidates anywhere and bring them onto your team in Kansas City, regardless of whether or not they live here, how do you see that changing the dynamics around recruiting and staffing? And, are there opportunities kind of both on the employer and candidate side inherent to that change?
Huge opportunities on both sides. I can speak, I think, on behalf of some of the other recruiting firms that are on the call, but, you know, for a long time with some of these specialty technology skill sets, we've had to recruit outside of the area because there's a finite amount of people with experience in some of those domains. And a lot of times what we have to do is we have to relocate them. Well, I mean, that you just made our job that much easier if we can go and find these people and, you know, on the West Coast, in Silicon Valley, on the East Coast,
Right.
you know, north of here, south of here, doesn't matter. They can do their jobs, but they don't have to uproot their lives that they've become accustomed to. That's a huge opportunity. And, you know, for companies, it just expands your talent pool that much more. So I think it could be a huge benefit for, you know, for both sides of the fence.
Yeah, no, I mean, we would certainly agree. And it, I think even more so kind of indicates some of those specialized skills can become really, really in demand and expand your footprint as a candidate, you know, and how companies can find you. So we do have a few questions that came in from the audience. I have one more from our team, and then I'm going to flip it over to this good Q&A. If you do have a question, I think we probably have time to get to one or two more. Please drop it into that Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on that. But my last question for you from us is, you know, we know many of your team are really active in the community in Kansas City. And I know, you know, through this, we've really gained an appreciation for the companies that we work with as the Tech Council and the partners that we've aligned ourselves with. I'm giving you an opportunity to kind of shout them out too. So who, you know, where are you finding strength from the community, and who are some of those companies and partners that have been essential to you forging ahead at ECCO Select and as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really tough question because it's hard to really single out any of our partners or our customers, you know, in terms of the support. I mean, I think we've all been in this together since all this happened. I mean, we can only control what we can control. And what the community has decided to do is we're just gonna, you know, we're gonna be good citizens, and we're gonna work together to try to figure out how we, you know, get back to normal as quickly as possible. You know, to maybe just, you know, distinguish out a few of them, you know, companies like Evergy, VML, YNR, Cerner, Kansas City Southern, the USDA, they've been incredible collaborators with us. You know, everyone's had to go through some degree of either cost management or cost cutting in some cases, and these organizations have really, you know, they've partnered with us to ensure that we could minimize that impact as much as possible, and they're collaborating with us to ensure that we both are set up for mutual success once we get past this disruption. So I think you know, they definitely need to be recognized. But I would say all of the customers in our portfolio have been committed to trying to make that happen. And I think that's what, you know, you hear on the news a lot about the spirit of the country right now, and it's you can feel it. It's resonating, and it's very inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I share that. I think we've been really made very aware of how grateful we are to have such good partners. It's become really evident from a business perspective, and just, you know, lending each other a little bit of grace and empathy during a time where it's a little crazy for all of us. So that's good to hear that that's your experience as well. So I'm gonna ask a couple questions here that we've had submitted from our audience. And this is a question about entry-level jobs, and it comes from one of our friends at KU Edwards campus. She's interested. So I don't know if you're familiar, the BSIT program, Bachelor of Science in IT program, is run out of the KU Edwards campus. I actually sit on that advisory board, so I'm very familiar with it, but it is geared to really respond to the industry needs from the IT sector. And students that come out of that program are pretty cross-discipline and are ready to be a role player on a kind of, you know, your typical structured IT team from day one, hit the ground running. They've done some real-time project-based work. Most of them have completed an internship or apprenticeship. So based on that kind of background, what are some of the entry-level data-related jobs that you're seeing for students that fit that kind of profile, that would have a skill set that could lend them to do something around data, big data, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of demand right now for ETL, extraction, transformation, and load developers. So that's not necessarily an entry level position, but you know, coming in as a data analyst or you know, someone who's going to be working in a track towards that line, I think could be really advantageous for that group. I would also say, I wouldn't neglect necessarily the security side of things. We're if your track is the data track, there's a lot of need out there, particularly on the government side of the house, for what they call privacy analysts, and a lot of that's around analyzing trends with regards to cyber attacks and those types of things. So I think that could be another area of interest. Obviously, the healthcare industry is going to have a ton of data needs with all of the assessments, evaluations, and predictions that they're going to be trying to accomplish, in the near term. So
yeah,
that would be an industry I would certainly target.
Good. No, that's good and specific feedback, which is, I think, really helpful as these bright folks are tasked with unleashing this group of talented individuals in a really odd time. So I think any advice
we would love
really,
to hear
really
from them at ECCO too. So
yes,
certainly
good to know. I can help you with that. Another question, do you see companies accepting non-credit certificates, or do they prefer a bachelor's degree? Or is there kind of a combination of both, I think, out there as well?
So I'm going to put on my recruiting hat here for a second, but I'll admit it's dated. My experience was always that the degree seemed to matter a little bit more on the application software side of the house. On the infrastructure side of the house, the certification and the trade designations generally was more acceptable. I'm not necessarily sure why that was, but that seemed to kind of be the trend. But I would say that most of our clients, the degree is not necessarily a table stakes type requirement, especially if the experience is a trade-off. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
yeah, no, it is, and I think that's it's still changing day to day. I mean, I think the ways companies designate and figure out how one equates to another. Another emerging trend we're saying is just stackable credentials and what that may look like, coming out of even high school and as a replacement, for some of that college work that students may have been pursuing otherwise. I think those are really interesting conversations to have. And currently, I think what our response is at the Tech Council is look at the amount of open jobs. We need as many pathways for students, to land in these careers as possible. And while not everything is a fit for every type of candidate, our hunch is that for the majority of individuals who are, interested in picking up these skills, there is a place for them in Kansas City's tech industry. It's just a matter of making sure companies and candidates continue to stay in communication. So here's another question kind of related to workforce preparation. So what kind of success and demand are you seeing from tech candidates that come out of the boot camp style programs? A couple were mentioned here, but I know we have a number of them in Kansas City. I'm sure you're familiar with those training programs.
Sure. So I'll just honest answer. I don't have a lot of direct. I mean, my recruiting team would be able to answer that question a lot better, but I will take an educated stab at it. I will tell you, with the amount of demand that we've had for the last 3, 4, 5 years, I think that's a very applicable path to go down to get your foot in the door of a software development or a technology-driven career. That being said, as I mentioned with one of the first questions we had, right now we've flipped to more of a client-driven market as opposed to a candidate-driven market, which is what it's been really for, close to a decade now. We've had more jobs and we've had qualified people to apply to them, and therefore, candidates get their, qualified candidates get their pick of what they want to go do. And with, near 20% unemployment, and tech sector hasn't been hit as hard, I get that, but, companies get a little bit more, they have a little bit more flexibility now in terms of the requirements they want to hire for. So I don't, the future will tell, what that will look like, but I do think that those are, very credible programs and definitely paths that are still worth pursuing. Technology is here to stay and it continues to change. So if you can, create that foundation, you obviously have the opportunity to evolve with it.
Yeah, and I think many of those programs do a really terrific job of real world application, projects and client-based projects that give those candidates a really solid leg up and ability to blend into the workforce really quickly. So let's see here. I've got another one. So like project management and the new marketplace environment, what percentage of open or new jobs, individual and management level, you anticipate would require less technical skills and more of those soft skill problem solver skills?
Now I'm putting on my hiring cap, and I will tell you that the soft skills in that type of role is way more important. I do think it's important that you have domain knowledge, but really more to the point of being able to ask the right questions and challenge when very unsubstantive answers, being able to challenge those so that you can to progress your project down the appropriate steps. But really, your ability to relate with people, to be diplomatic, but still be able to drive outcomes, and being organized, and all these things that are, super important for anyone who's in, any type of management role, whether it be a project management role, a process management role, or a people management role. Those are the things that move the needle and really, create positive outcomes for organizations. The technologists, they've got their handle on, how the technology needs to work. It's the manager's job to ensure that those paths are followed appropriately.
Yeah. So somebody who has the high level of development skill with some of those softer skills, are they like the most employable person in Kansas City right now?
Yeah. We call those the chameleons. So
nice.
No, if you got the best of both worlds, you're positioned very well in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's clear. This is an interesting question, kind of looking ahead, and we're having some of these conversations with our member companies as well. So, what suggestions do you have for internships this summer as businesses are experiencing budget cuts, and maybe even just some of the in-person configuration of this type of arrangement might be tricky? Have you seen anything really interesting out there? Maybe if you guys have a program that you've planned or help other companies with, what trends are you?
Yeah, we don't play in the servicing of internship programs that much at ECCO, but I will say, most of the enterprises in town all have, very strong internship programs. Cerner has been one that's had one for decades now. H&R Block, I know, has one. I would also say this, and this isn't as appealing, I know, but if you're just looking for experience, I have seen a bit of a trend toward unpaid internships. So if you're really looking just to get experience and get something on your resume, and you don't necessarily need to collect a paycheck over the summer while you're still a student, that could be another option to look at, simply for the purposes of making yourself more marketable, once you're out in the job market.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of virtual internships pop up as well. I know we heard about one from our partners over at Community America, from their chief innovation officer. They're doing some really interesting work in innovation, and I think that's a pretty innovative approach to an internship. I think we're offering it for high school and college students, knowing there's a lot of really talented young people out there with maybe some time on their hands and skills to contribute. So I'll be interested to see the rise of some of those virtual internships as well.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of that, one of the first questions we talked about was how companies want to approach this new, these market conditions and whatnot. And again, I'd go back to, I think they all are still trying to take as strategic a view as possible. And internship programs and recruiting college graduates is so strategic to their business and frankly, it's not the biggest line item on their expense sheet. So I don't see that being an area that demand goes down significantly, even with the conditions we have at hand.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think another thing that we're looking at how companies are approaching is just a candidate experience as well. If that's being moved virtually, that takes out maybe some critical components. Are you seeing anything innovative that some of the companies you're working with are doing to ramp up candidates when they are hired, makes them feel like they're part of a team, even though they're in their living room?
Yeah, you know what's interesting? It kind of goes back to one of the answers I gave a few minutes ago, which is, you know, a lot of these highly technical and unique skills. A lot of times we are recruiting from out of town, and they generally what they do is they go through onboarding virtually already. So a lot of these solutions are already in place, and we've actually been doing them at ECCO for a couple of years now as well. So, you know, a lot of this stuff. I mean, like I said, with the work from home comment, a lot of this stuff can be facilitated without being physically, you know, in front of each other. And so, so I think that you're just going to see that reinforced even more, you know, given what we've had to adapt to.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think a lot of tech companies are really prepared. It looks like we have one more question. I'm gonna throw to you, and then we'll probably need to wrap up. Another question about certifications. Do you see any demand for non-technical certificates like Lean Six Sigma, quality auditor, supply chain professional, those types of certificates?
Probably the two that we see most frequently is the PMP. You know, that still is kind of that's the top of the line for project managers is that particular cert. The other one and this one's been popular for a number of years now, is the ITIL certification. You know, when we're talking about enterprise infrastructure operations, having that very strong service management knowledge framework is, I think, really important, and a lot of government customers, especially, are really tying on to that to create, you know, a best-in-class service offering. So I would say that that's another, and that one, you know, I think you can get your I can't remember what the level is, but it's a 3-day boot camp. It's relatively inexpensive, and you get at least the first level of certification from that.
Right. No, ITIL I know is really popular as well. And you're right on TMP. I mean, that's not technically a technical certificate, but is extremely in demand. And I think as you're observing, maybe there is a little bit more competition on the candidate side. Those types of, that could be the thing that gets you a leg up over maybe another candidate with similar skill sets for those project management jobs. Yeah. Well, Darren, thank you for your time and insight today. We could not appreciate it more, and we appreciate the work that you and Jeanette and the whole ECCO Select leadership team does for the KC Tech Council. Another just reminder to those on the call, please do sign up to receive that monthly Tech Checkpoint email. Hopefully, after going through it today, you have a better sense of what story that data is telling us, and maybe some of the insight you can glean from it as well. I know early on we had a couple kind of specific questions about the Tech Checkpoint. We are happy to, it's actually a benefit for KC Tech Council members that they can send us a specific query around what they're looking for with a specific job title. We could send you back some data that's around just that job title. So if you're hiring a Java developer with 3 to 5 years experience, and you send us some of those key metrics, we can then send you back a report that gives you a bit more insight on just that particular title, which I think for a lot of us is really helpful when we're planning. I think, you know, now more than ever, we need to rely on good data and to kind of back up the decisions that we're making as leaders. So that's a great tool for it. And lastly, please, if you do have open tech jobs, well, first, remember ECCO Select is always a great resource for you. And secondly, remember that the KC Tech Council has a job board that is free to all members of the community to post tech jobs for a limited time. We know this is a unique time, and we want to open up some resources that typically do carry a charge like most job boards, but we've lifted those charges to help companies get the word out about who is hiring. And if you are a candidate, there is a resource page just for you on our site as well. You can share your resume with us. We'd be happy to connect you with folks that we know that are hiring, because we know there is a lot of good talent on the market right now. So thank you to Darren. Thank you to Ryan for his presentation earlier today. And thanks to ECCO Select for their support of Tech Checkpoint and the KC Tech Council. Please stay tuned to our calendar. We'll be hosting more of these great webinar activities over. I mean, that's really how we're doing everything these days. So we'll have more Zoom opportunities for you in the weeks to come. And if you're interested in partnering with us on one of those, I'm happy to be that contact for you for that and any other membership questions. I'm just Kara at KC Tech Council. So thank you guys, and everyone have a great afternoon. Enjoy your next Zoom call, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Kara. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.